Academica Media. From Academica Media Studios in Miami, Florida, it's Big Ideas in Education, a weekly recap of inspiration and innovation in your schools.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Big Ideas in Education. I am your host, Dr. Sarah Boulos-Fye from Somerset Academy Schools, joined, of course, by my co-host, Ryan Kairalla of Doral College. Hi, Ryan.
Hi, Sarah. Great to be chatting with you.
Same. Let's hear what you want to talk about today.
Well, recently, Sarah, the EdWeek Research Center polled over 1,000 students and asked them what could teachers do to help them feel more motivated to do their best in school. And according to the survey, the most popular response, selected by 35% of the students polled, and something that I'm a strong proponent of, I should mention, was to give students a chance to redo assignments if they got a low grade. Proponents of this technique argue that the approach gives students an opportunity to learn from their mistakes and places value on rewarding students who eventually can demonstrate mastery, rather than only reward students who achieve mastery the first time. However, in the interests of providing all the perspectives here, a recent unscientific LinkedIn poll of approximately 3,000 teachers showed that many in the profession think that giving students the opportunity to redo assignments may have some drawbacks. Some teachers argue that the approach incentivizes students to not try as hard the first time, which just leads to teachers having to grade more papers. Other teachers fear that this approach encourages plagiarism. And finally, teachers note that teachers note that the students more likely to take advantage of a redo tend not to be the students who need to redo their work in the first place. One teacher noted, quote, "I have offered students the chance to redo assignments. Only the ones who already try hard in the class take it. The ones who don't care that their grade is a D or F don't bother." Now, as I said in the beginning, allowing students to redo an assignment is a big part of what I do in my classroom. I tend to say that in life we often get a chance to mess things up and then learn from our mistakes, and that's how we learn. And so school should be the same way. But I was surprised to hear other teachers with a different perspective, and I wanted to bring that different perspective to you, Sarah, and see what you think.
So I think it's fair to hear teachers say that they're noticing only some students take advantage of it, and also that they're seeing a lack of effort maybe on the first attempt. I'm going to give an example from right here in the state of Florida. So right now in Florida, our testing system has moved from summative evaluation at the end of the year to a progress monitoring system where we're where we're required to give our students a test 3 times a year. And so in a way, it's moving towards mastery, right? So you do a certain assessment of learning at 3 points in the school year versus just 1 at the end of the school year. So in a way, I think you can tie the two together. And guess what we're seeing? We're seeing a lot of what you're describing right now. We have teachers feeling like their students are maybe not taking these progress monitoring assessments as seriously as they should the first time, saying, well, okay, I'll do better next time. And we're noticing that there are some students that are, hyper focused on doing better the next time. Of course, for all of our students, these are not the only assessments that they're taking. But it's interesting that they're starting to fall along those fault lines the same way that these teachers are concerned about. I'm also interested, I think you said that the largest number of students who had responded to that was 35%.
Yeah, only because the survey gave the students many different choices. And so it was a plurality type thing.
Right. 35% is not a resounding, request from my perspective. So that's an interesting, I wonder if we whittled it down and saw how students reacted to that, how it would be. But going back for a second about effort, I think that this philosophy of allowing for mastery and really working towards mastery is a fundamental kind of mind shift from what we typically see in the classroom. You mentioned you use it with your students. Well, your students are taking college level courses, right? So there is a shift already in the mindset of, well, this is a different level of course that I'm taking, so I need to put in that effort. So what happens for not college level courses, right? What about teachers who are teaching regular general classes, not an honors class, not something that's not typically the way that we approach mastery. We give an assessment, we get it back, we tell them what they did wrong, and we move on. So having that shift in expectation and also having that shift of communication about how we're performing and how it's okay to fail and it's okay to not understand while giving your best effort, I think is a communication that doesn't happen very often, right? So how do we communicate about effort? How do we communicate about motivation? If I knew I had several tries to do something as a person, would I not give effort? Possibly. Would I also take risks in places that I wouldn't otherwise? Possibly. So it's not just a conversation about effort, but it's about risk taking and when it's okay to fail and what can we do to learn from that failure. So I think that I know I'm going around and around, but I think that there's a whole shift in this whole mindset of outcome versus learning process.
I think that's right.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure if I was getting there, but that's what was in my mind.
And I think to the extent that teachers have concerns about what allowing students to redo an assignment means to them and means to their classroom culture, and they're all legitimate concerns, and I don't mean to discount them, but I think a lot of them are based in the mindset of still having the old kind of culture on how we evaluate students, not seeing learning as a process, but kind of seeing it more as a destination. And so anything that goes against that idea and goes away from what we think should maybe need a giant cultural shift in education and how we perceive what students' work is supposed to be is going to be met with resistance. And look, I'm not saying that I haven't in my own classroom had some fits and starts with this approach. I've had some pretty creative students who come up with unique ways to game the system a little bit. I remember I used to have a rule that said that, you could just redo assignments whenever you want. So what would happen is students would just completely ignore the due dates because they're like, well, if I can submit it whenever, I'm going to submit it the last week of class. And that was not good. So I was like, okay. So I thought I had it all figured out. I was like, all right, then you can redo assignments, but only if you initially submit it the first time by the due date. And I got one student who submitted an assignment that all the assignment said was, look, professor, I'm going to be real with you. I don't have this ready yet, but I'm turning something in before the due date to lock in my right to redo it. And I wrote back, I was like, that's pretty creative. Congratulations. You're the last student I'm going to let get away with this. And then I had to change the policy again to say that the students have to do a meaningful effort the first time to be able to redo it. But, and so I sympathize with instructors here, but I just think it's really important because in most situations in the world, you often don't, it's often not one and done. And, learning from mistakes is such an effective way that we learn that if you take it out of the one place where we're learning the most, which is school, we're really disadvantaging students and instructors alike.
I think that the whole conversation about learning process versus outcomes is something that gets really muddy in our classrooms because we want our teachers to focus on the learning process, but the only way we're measuring most of our teachers is through outcomes. And that can be a really frustrating and, hard truth to deal with. And so if they are only being measured by a certain thing, it is only natural that it comes down to the student level as well. And so if we don't change that mind shift, I don't see that it's going to take that much hold in our classrooms.
That is an interesting perspective, and I can definitely sympathize with teachers there. And I think, Sarah, your story ties a little bit to, how we're impacting teachers in the education system. And you were looking at a little bit of a cross-border perspective with your story, right?
Absolutely. I know we spend a lot of time talking about K-12 education, primarily in the United States on the show. But, there was a title of an article that jumped out to me from Forbes India. And it said, stop blaming teachers, start improving teaching instead. So this is talking a bit about some of the woes that are happening in the Indian educational system, not so much the United States, but I think there's a lot we can learn from each other. And I know that we use a lot of the same research in looking at practices in the United States as they do in India. So I thought it was interesting. And there's some really good anecdotes here at the beginning, but there's some talk about how inherently there is no such thing as an inherently good or bad teacher, but that there is a well-trained or a poorly trained teacher. And I like that because I think it's interesting. It's going to get a little meta for a second, so stick with me. As a classroom teacher, I do believe all students can learn, right? Take me out of the classroom and now I am a teacher of other teachers, right? I am a coach, I'm an administrator. Do I not believe that all teachers can learn to be good teachers? Most of us, if we're being honest, don't. We don't. We believe some are born and some are made. I constantly tell people when I'm complimented on something that I've done, that I did not come out of the box this way. I was not born knowing how to do some of these things. Somebody had to invest in me. Somebody had to invest in my teaching practice. Somebody looked at our students and said, I am going to help you be better because that child deserves it. And I think that's the way that we don't always approach teacher education and teacher preparation. So the research here is telling us that we can take 3 practical steps to manifest good teaching in every classroom. 1, first, we need a scientific recipe for good teaching. Imagine having a step-by-step approach to teach every concept. Students are clear about the lesson's aim, conduct a hands-on activity to experience it, analyze it deeply by questioning, apply their knowledge to a real-life challenge, and are assessed on what they have learned. 2, teachers need a practical toolkit. They need to be equipped with this classroom toolkit so that when they go into their classroom, they are prepared with well-researched teaching plans and learning aids they know precisely how to use, how to introduce concepts, how to conduct purposeful activities, and ask probing questions. And finally, showing versus telling. Teaching skills improve when teachers and coaches demonstrate effective lessons, observe how other teachers teach, share actionable feedback, and offer practical tips on engaging children. Self-reflection and peer collaboration can further cement these skills. Now, these are not brand new ideas, right? These are things that have been talked about for a long time. These are also tenets that come out of how we teach those in the medical profession how to become doctors, how we teach those in the legal profession, how to become lawyers. This is an intensely complex job that is not, it's not treated that way. It's not treated that way in so many different facets, of course, in compensation, but it's teacher preparation programs and teacher education programs are not necessarily doing what we say or what we know research says will work. And so how do we make sure if we are working with our teachers, and of course I'm talking mostly to administrators and coaches here, how do we make sure that we are investing the right things in our teachers and preparing them to be the best classroom teachers they could be? Because if we have that faith in our students, we should be able to invest that in our teachers as well.
So first off, I just want to say, Sarah, I imagine it is such a relief to new teachers when they have somebody like you who's so experienced who reminds them that you didn't come out of the box this way. I think for so many first-year teachers, like we've all gone through that experience where you see somebody who's really good and is just owning their classroom. Often it's in like a video, like they'll show you like a video of best practices or whatever, and you see some teacher that is just owning the classroom and is doing everything right, and the students are loving it and they're all engaged and they're all learning. And you think of where they are and you think of where you are and you're like, well, I'm never that. I'm just not that person. And it is very reassuring to remind that first-year teacher that teacher wasn't born, that teacher was made. And you can be made into that too, with hard work and with study and with the investment that we are going to make in you. And I think what you're talking about is also liberating for schools too, because if, as we continue to address teacher shortages and we're trying to find more good teachers, if teachers are just born and not made, that's a very expensive proposition because it's generally a lot more expensive for a school to find a good teacher than to train an existing teacher to be what you need them to be. And so
Absolutely.
it's always going to be more affordable to create internal professional development programs, to invest in your existing workforce and to retain them and make them more effective. And so if there are systematic approaches that we know exist to make teachers more effective and to make them made and not just born good, that's a reassuring prospect for both the teachers and the schools alike.
So I'm going to try to go back to something that we mentioned when we were talking a bit about your topic. And that's the idea of learning process versus outcomes. If we are measured solely on the outcomes we produce in the beginning of our teaching practice, we are doomed. We are doomed, right? Because I can tell you, and not a single, if a first year teacher is claiming that they've got it and this is amazing, something is going wrong in that classroom. I'm going to tell you right now, not to insult anyone, but no, that's not how it works. Our first experiences are not mastery level experiences. And so how do we take that same mind shift of learning process and making sure that we have the opportunity to learn from our mistakes, invest the time in our schedule as administrators to put planning in there, to put common planning in there, to put coaching in there so that teachers can, in a safe way, learn from their mistakes, work with master teachers who have the preparation already done, who have learned. How do we make sure that we invest in that? So I'll get off my soapbox because I know I can go on and on and on. But I just feel very passionately about teacher preparation, teacher support. And when I read things like this, it's interesting to me. Teacher shortages and teacher issues are not just happening locally, not even just in our country. These are issues that are plaguing education across the world. And so how can we think of, in the world that we impact and the, sphere of influence that we have, how do we make sure that we're supporting that teacher to make sure that the child in front of us is getting the best education they possibly can? All right, everyone, we're so excited to talk about these topics, as you can clearly hear, but we also are excited to hear and learn more about you. Help us improve our learning progress and let us learn from you as well. Please feel free to reach out to us using the hashtag BigIdeasInEducation. We love learning from everyone out there, and we love sharing what we're learning. Have a great week.
The views expressed on the preceding program have been those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Academica, its clients, staff, affiliates, or advertisers.